Father Maciel, the greatest Catholic fundraiser of the 20th century, according to the investigative reporter uh, Jason Berry and Jerry Renner in their great book, Vows of Silence. And I, as a budding legionary, played my part in the fundraising, as you will see in this chapter 14 of my autobiography, Naive and Sentimental Dubliner in the Legion of Christ. A couple of little corrections from my previous number 47 taping. I may have said what referred to Reverend Moon and the church that he created. I believe it's the Unification Church. It's not the United Church of Christ. That would be a serious offense to the United Church of Christ. So the Moonies are the Unification Church. And the book by Miss Tapia regarding her experience in the Opus Dei, which is now a classic, written originally in the Spanish language. I'm not sure about a translation. It was called En el Umbral, which means on the threshold, not on the doorstep, as I said, on the threshold. So let us continue about this, the great, I would say it's the charisma of Father Maciel. I would also say it's the charisma of the Legionaries of Christ. So Father Maciel, he has this, for me, is one of his greatest, and I think, as I said, that's why I quoted the investigative reporter, and many would agree, the greatest fundraiser in the Catholic Church in the, what would you say, second part of the 20th century. When he began his foundation there in 1941, when he gathered the first group of little boys there in Mexico City, I believe. So let me continue talking about benefactors and all this kind of thing. So we, as the first Irish seminarians and all the first legionaries, I'm from the 60s. We also had our benefactresses, and this was also a way to encourage people to give money to the Legion and to the foundation. I think Father Maciel was very clever about showing the benefactresses that that he had a lot of seminarians, and I'm sure the Irish were a new attraction because to them there had only been Spaniards and Mexicans. So mostly there were some Germans actually recruited by Father Maciel in the early days of the Legion. They did not persevere in their vocations and left at different stages. Well, way back in the 40s and 50s. My first benefactress was Doña Josefita. I don't know her whole name. I think it'll be given to me later on. Josefita Perez. Let's give you this little story then, and keep it short again. During the course of my training, I was to have several other women supposedly contributing financially to the cost of my formation. So it was personalized. They were general benefactresses to the Legion, but to make that more concrete, then they were assigned certain seminarians that would be their godchildren, and they were our godmothers. I was to have several other women supposedly contributing financially to the cost of my formation, that's the Legion word for training, some individually and others collectively. Each one was considered herself the godmother, madrina, of my priestly vocation. I addressed and wrote to these benefactresses with the honorable title of Doña, Doña Josefita, and so forth, which means lady. There was also a very important one, was Doña Edme, the wife of millionaire Santiago Galas. I think he had like printing and newspapers. One of the most famous of all the benefactresses was Flora Barragan de Garza, who would be called affectionately Florita, little flower. And she was part of the Garza Sada dynasty in Monterrey, Mexico. And there was also, in my experience, forgive me, the sensuous Senora Nora Meserhane of Lebanese descent, wife of a Caracas business magnate. Now, I also had a benefactress who was a little bit more personal, and she would write to me. She was a lovely lady. One person with whom I corresponded in a more individual way during my Roman sojourn was the widow Rosa Irigoyen de Senderos, mother of prominent Mexican industrialist Manuel Senderos Irigoyen. He was a truly influential Mexican of his generation, so we're talking 1960s, and with a great sense of civic duty. Now, there's you can imagine that you may not kind of get the drift of this, but Mexico, with a great aristocracy, with a very, very rich upper class, millionaires, and then very, very poor people on the other extreme. And this is what usually impresses people when they visit Latin America and they see this stark contrast between these. And of course, but even Dublin's getting a little bit like that now. But there were certain districts, certain neighborhoods in Mexico City where the rich people lived behind big fenced gardens and gates, which is something you don't see in the United States, where people usually have their lawn is leading into their home. But in Mexico, Latin America, they're cut off with big gates and big high walls usually around, so nobody can get in or protect themselves against robbery and attacks. So this was the mother of Manuel Senderos. Manuel generously contributed to the construction of the legionaries' first big university, famous university in Mexico, Anáhuac, Universidad Anáhuac. And I believe he may have studied with the Jesuits, and so he also supported the Jesuits and their Universidad Iberoamericana, also called La Ibero, Mexico City. His labor of love, I think, also became the IPADE, IPADE, an Opus Dei higher institute for business leaders in Mexico City. In this sense, the Opus Dei went a step beyond the legionaries, and this was more like a higher echelon academy for business leaders. Doña Rosa, as I called her, wrote personal handwritten letters full of real maternal affection for this future priest. I couldn't tell my mom, I joke in my autobiography. I assume that if her donations did not go directly to my training, they must have helped defray the cost, at least indirectly. Some of the more popular legionary seminarians, or the older ones, had several benefactresses and suffered real qualms of conscience juggling their various godmothers, and got into really tight spots, especially if more than one arrived for their ordination. Short. Brevity is the soul of wit.